Hi everybody, nice to be with you today. I'm here to talk about this new cycle that we're opening through Tara Mandala, and I'm here with my son, Tulku Ösela Dordże. We had the great privilege to be here at Tara Mandala together with other people in 2002 when this cycle began. And it is a Dharma cycle, which means a treasure cycle. Dharmas are teachings that are hidden in different ways, sometimes in the earth, sometimes in water or fire, and even in the whorls of the leaves of trees, or sometimes in the whorls in the river. There's physical situations that trigger the revelation of dharmas that were imprinted into the mind stream of the 25 disciples of Guru Rinpoche and Jeszie Tsogjal in the 8th century. So the exciting thing to me about this cycle is that it was revealed in America, and it is for this time. So the Dharma tradition is a way of sort of updating the tradition so that over the centuries, things don't get lost, and sort of like that game where you whisper something into somebody's ear and then they pass it on, and by the end it's something totally different. So the dharmas are a way to keep those teachings fresh. And in fact, A.dzomem Rinpoche, who's the tertun, or the revealer of these treasures, said, it's so fresh, it's like the warm breath of the Dakini. The warm breath of the Dakini. Yeah. So maybe you could talk a little bit about it and your vision of it.
Since the revelation of the Ösel Nyingtig here at Tara Mandala in 2002, it's been an intimate practice, I think, for many of the people who received it in that moment. A.dzomem Rinpoche has asked us to begin to share this revelation with the West. I'm just really excited to be able to bring this forth and share it with everyone, because it's been such an important part of my life.
I wanted to tell the story of how this happened, and you can also add to it. But yeah, so this was December of 2002, and it was before we had buildings at Tara Mandala. We just had the yurt. 30-foot yurt, and there were a lot of people in that yurt receiving teachings from A.dzomem Rinpoche.
It was intimate.
It was cozy, and which was good because it was very cold. And so there was someone in the audience, or I guess you could say the participants, who said something, mentioned something to Rinpoche. What was that she said?
It was, how can we maintain our samaya for the empowerment? Rinpoche had given us spontaneous empowerment at the time. We were receiving a teaching on Jigme Limpa's Laughter of the Dakinis, a che practice from the Lamy Tsultrim Allione. And in the process of giving that initial empowerment, he was like, okay, now I'm going to give spontaneous empowerment. And it, in reality, it ended up being the Ripit Sawang, which is this empowerment where essentially the dynamic expression of Rigpa is showed to you, or you encounter it. And so it's an important empowerment in Dzogchen, because that is the aspect that you end up taking on the path. So then the next day she asked, in Rinpoche, when he was giving the empowerment, he was giving cues that there was something there was more behind this. And so the next day, as we're kind of, you know, beginning to ask, well, what's going on? She asked Rinpoche, how can we maintain our samaya for this empowerment that you have given us? And then we began to make prostrations in that moment, and Rinpoche's like, oh, very auspicious. And then he began to reveal the terma in that moment, and he said that he had this incredible vision with Jeszie Tsogjal. In the 8th century, Guru Rinpoche gave these teachings, and Jeszie Tsogjal and a few other individuals, they wrote them down, and then he would make a prophecy of whoever was in the audience that this person at this period in time, when the causes and conditions come together, will reveal this teaching.
And what their name would be.
And what their name would be, and
often where they were from.
Yeah, the various amounts of detail.
It was full moon night, and the full moons in the winter in Colorado are really quite incredible because we're at a high altitude here. So it literally feels like the moon is huge, and it's very clear in the winter. And so it's almost impossible to sleep during a full moon in the winter, really almost any time. Full moon here, at least for me, I always know I'm really not going to sleep very much for the next few days. So there was that clear sky with the incredible stars that we have here. And then in the morning, I would often go into Rinpoche's room early and just, greet him and see what was happening and what would happen that day. And that day, I opened the door, and then they were like, kind of, don't come in. And he was writing. And the writing went on for quite a while. And then he allowed me to come in, and he said, I've had an extraordinary dream vision of Tara Mandala as the body of Tara. And he explained how the formation of the land itself is her body, and also a certain place we should build a temple to her that's on her knee. And then he said, and I have received a terma and of trauma. And he made other prophecies about the future of Tara Mandala and that people would actually reach rainbow body here and various other things.
Practicing this practice of trauma.
Practicing this, yeah. So then, at a certain point, we came down from my house, which is about a mile up on the hill, and winds down. The road winds down. There was big snowbanks on the sides, and then in this meadow that you pass through, there was a vertical rainbow, which was mainly orange, like a brilliant orange, all the colors of the rainbow, but it just was shooting literally out of the meadow and out of the snow. And then beside the car, there were rainbows rolling beside the car. And so when we got to the yurt down here, that I can almost see from where I'm sitting, it's a 30-foot yurt. It has a sort of rusty maroon skin on it. A yurt's a round building. Actually originally comes from Mongolia, but these are created in the United States, and it's basically like a tent, a round tent. So we arrived there, and everyone was waiting, and then he began to teach on this a little bit. And it was just, I think the word mind-blowing actually applies here, because it was really mind-blowing for everyone and life-changing. I don't think you could find anyone who was there that day that would say, this didn't change my life. And so he taught it, and we received it, and it was very brief, and you could feel that he was protecting it. And then over the next year or two, whenever he came back, we would request him to teach more on it. So over that time, I took notes and other people took notes, which is part of what we will draw on as we teach this. But also he's given further teachings and commentaries on these practices. And then other practices have come since then, connected to this cycle. So I thought it's interesting the way you said how you saw like a perfect retreat schedule. And maybe you can talk about that.
Sure. So the trauma cycle is very short, but at the same time it would have, it's kind of how you would engage in a daily practice in retreat. Essentially, in the secret instructions, there are some preliminary practices that you start your morning with, and then there's Guru Yoga, and then there's Semtri, or mind training, that you would do, and then mid-morning you would practice the sadhana, and then you'd have your break, and then again in the afternoon you would practice some more mind training, depending on, there's all these different instructions in it, and so it just kind of depends where you're at. And then you can practice the sadhana, and then in the evening, as you're kind of closing your day, you kind of complete the sadhana practice in that moment, and then you practice the chi.
Which is typically done the last thing.
The last thing before you go to bed. And so it's this perfect kind of cycle for that. In that it has everything that you need to go into retreat. It's complete in and of itself. So these Dharma cycles, they belong to an overarching or a container of teachings called the Ösel Nyingtig. And the Ösel Nyingtig means, Ösel is, in general, can mean a luminosity, which is kind of the luminous nature of our mind, or the primordial wisdom, the innate primordial wisdom that is the core of our essence. And so the luminous, and then Nyingtig is the heart essence. So it's the luminous heart essence. And so just that kind of gives you an idea of what we're talking about in these termas. And this awareness is what we are engaging with on the path. And so it, with the idea with luminosity is that it becomes kind of self-illuminating, in the sense that as we progress on the path, it begins to unfold. It's not something newly created. It's innate. It's primordial. And that's important to understand, because there is no transformation. Everybody is already has this primordial Buddha nature within them. And so this is what we're taking on the path, is our Buddha nature.
And then the other thing that we're working with here is Rigpa. Rigpa is, it's another word that has multiple levels of meanings, and it can just mean knowledge. Like there's, Trimrik means to know laws. Trim is laws. So it can be that kind of basic word for knowledge. But the way that Rigpa is used in Dzogchen teachings is very different than that. It is the knowing or the awareness of our primordial nature, which is luminous and empty, and which is constantly present and all-pervading. These words like Rigpa, Ösel Nyingtig, to me, I don't want to translate them, because they have so many multiple levels of meaning that if you choose one, you limit that. So there's some words that I feel should stay, and you learn the meaning. You learn those multiple meanings. So when you read it, those levels all are percolating and open up within you. But actually, it's about the glow, the luminosity of the universe. All of this is pravasada.
The trauma cycle is really unlike anything I've ever encountered, and it's extraordinary. I think it's fair to say that. And if we look at the way the practice is based, it's called secret primordial wisdom. Trauma known as secret primordial wisdom, and so we are taking secret primordial wisdom which is the ground, but it's secret because we're not aware of this primordial wisdom, and so it's obscure to us. But we, through practice and through the pointing out of this nature, we are able to then take this secret primordial wisdom on the path. And then that in itself then also becomes the result, because the result is primordial wisdom. And so this practice for accomplishing trauma is amazing because of that. It's taking the actual result as the path. But luckily, we have been able to receive teachings over the years and clarifications. And like Lama Tsultrim said, the warm breath of the Dakinis is still there. And it's very exciting to begin this. And I think it really just goes to speak of the times, and that this is really needed right now, because that's partly why the Dharma is revealed in this moment, is because it's addressing specific aspects of our time, of our problems, so that we can transform our obscurations into primordial wisdom.
Yeah, and just to define a few terms in case you don't know all the terms that we're using. The trauma means wrathful or fierce feminine. So it's the fierce mother, the fierce feminine, which to me is also significant because of my last book, Wisdom Rising, is about the fierce feminine. And I feel there's such a need for that in the world today, that yes, we need the feminine, but we need her in her strength and her ability to say no or yes. That fierceness is an aspect that has really been forbidden. It's the bitch or the witch. And so to own that in a positive way, in a way that energy of intensity manifests with compassion and wisdom, is very important to actually shift what's happening on the earth right now. We need her. And so I wrote a whole book about that with the Dakini Mandala, which creates actually a really fantastic base for these cycles that we will be teaching now. And it's called Wisdom Rising, Journey into the Mandala of the Empowered Feminine. So that's trauma. And then sadhana is a way to talk about a Vajrayana practice. So within Buddhism, there's the Sutrayana, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana, which was the last period that developed in history of Buddhism. And in that, you have deities, you have yoga, you have mantras, you have mandalas, you have sacred dancing, sacred sexuality, and so on. It was a very different kind of Buddhism that evolved between the 700s and the 1200s in India, and then eventually went to Tibet. The sadhana was sort of a way to define these practices that have a beginning and an end, and then within the practice you enter a mandala, or you become a deity, or you see the deity in front of you. And the deity in these practices embodies qualities, enlightening qualities that you have within you. And so with the identification with the deity, those qualities, let's say if it's Chenrezig, that's the quality of compassion. If it's Tara, it's also compassion. If it's Prajnaparamita, it's wisdom. And with trauma, it's wisdom. It's a deep, fierce, feminine wisdom, which doesn't mean like an angry woman. It's an intense energy. The wrathful deities indicate intensity. Peaceful is quiet and it's slow. Wrathful is fast and intense. So when else are we our most intense than when we're angry? So it's taking that energy and then bringing it to the path. So the sadhana is that practice. It has a developed deity practice in it, would have a tsok in it. And so we have that as part of this. And also recently when we saw Rinpoche, he gave us this injunction, really. It was like a command, like, you need to do this. And he said it to me almost as soon as I saw him. It was like, now is time. And I said, but there's no Wangpei. There's no text to give the empowerment for it. And he said, I'll download that from the Dharmakaya. And the next day he did, and the way it comes to him is it's almost like he's reading something in space. It's kind of eyes are going back and forth, and then he dictates it, and it's all rhyming with this incredible sort of revelatory language that it's almost like the words kind of pop as he says them, and then the multitude of meaning behind them kind of opens up. So none of these practices are very long, but each word sort of, it's almost like a door opening into a huge room in which there's so much depth and meaning with every word. And that's throughout the whole cycle it's like that, right? It's not long, like the texts are not long. But in doing this now for however many years, since 2002, what I've experienced is every time I do it, it's like it opens up in a different way or in a deeper way. And that's the quality of the cycle is, it's like a revelation to do it. When you do it, it's like a revelation to yourself. It's like it's revealed, but then it's like another level of revelation. That's my experience. I don't know.
Yeah, it's that secret primordial wisdom, beginning to be uncovered.
Yeah.
And every time we engage with the practice more and more, it's becoming more present in ourselves. We become more engaged with it. So I was thinking, since this coming year is going to be 2020, how kind of the interdependence of the Ösel Nyingtig beginning the cycle at Tara Mandala. So in many ways, it's kind of like the Ösel Nyingtig coming into focus in 2020.